This episode of Planted is brought to you by Pax Labs.
The Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Planted with Sara Payan. I'm Sara Payan, your host, and today we are welcoming back Alex Rogers. He is the founder of the International Cannabis Business Conference and also Talman Group. Alex, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here, man.
It's great to be here, Sarah. I really appreciate it. You're crushing it.
Oh, thank you so much. So are you. And I'm excited to see you in Berlin. You've just built such a beautiful thing, bringing people from all over the world together. And, really, it's a melding it's a meeting of the minds in many ways.
It is. We started it in 2017. Well, the Berlin event, and it's kind of ebbed and flowed the market up until 2024 when Germany really definitively changed their laws, legalized home grow, legalized personal use, legalized basically social clubs, which are local rec dispensaries, and then took cannabis off the narcotics list, the big whopper, which created a full de facto legalization or legal system in Germany, almost reminiscent to how Wild West it was back in Cali under medical back in the days.
Yeah.
However, it's even more Wild West in Germany. So that's what's crazy. For a legalizer, an activist like me, I love it. It's absolutely remarkable what's happening right now. So we've worked hard to get to this point.
Why do you think they were able to pull it together where so many other countries are kind of wait and see?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, for one, they have the luxury of doing what they want. They're the big dogs in Europe. So if they're gonna like do something outside the box, then it's easier for a country like Germany to do it than a smaller country. That's just how it works in Europe, right? And the other reason was they had a very liberal government, right? And it was kind of a perfect storm in terms of who became the health, minister and who was then the drug czar. These were all, at least the drug czar who became the drug czar, Burkhard Blinert, who was the drug czar for 4 or 5 years. He was basically ahead. I don't know that for sure, but he was down, and he had spoken at the ICBC before. He had been a parliamentary member before. Then he wasn't, but he was still at the ICBC because he was such a proponent. And then lo and behold, like the best proponent of cannabis in Germany, became the actual drug czar of Germany, with a liberal government, with a strong liberal coalition, where they didn't have to pander to the conservatives. And of course, being liberal and conservative means a little bit of different things when you compare it with Europe and America.
Right.
But in general, they're similar tenets and precepts.
Yeah. What does Berlin represent culturally and politically that makes it the right home for ICBC?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because a lot of people, when I came to Berlin, I predicted Berlin would become the epicenter of international cannabis, right? And of course, I helped make that happen. But in fact, and a lot of people thought that was crazy back in the day because it was Germany, and Germany wasn't the big smoker culture or whatever traditionally. But we find that's actually not true, and I'll get back to that in a second. But Berlin is like the most progressive city in the world, and I mean that in generally a good way, because that word progressive can be overused or misused. But Berlin is just a dope city where it's an international city. Anything you just feel really free that nobody really gives a fuck what the next person is doing in Berlin. You get to do whatever you want. So you have the Christians and the Muslims and the old conservative Germans and the young hipsters, and they're all just living in Berlin together somehow in relative peace. And so Berlin is just like this bastion of culture and freedom. And even more than maybe San Francisco, which probably would be the other, what I would consider, or at least back in the day, things change, things are all kind of twisted up now in this world, but, and Amsterdam's another place where it's very open and liberal, but Berlin is so big, way bigger than San Francisco or Amsterdam, obviously not bigger than the Bay Area, but almost, I think there was almost I reckon there's about 5 million people close to in all the Berlin area. And it's massive and it's spread out. So it's like its own republic almost of Germany. So it has special status, it has a special feel, it has a special dialect. And the fact is that Germany, when people said, oh, Germany wasn't like the usual suspect to that be likely to legalize cannabis like it did, in fact it was, because I lived in Germany for a long time and I spent a lot of time there and back in the day. And I used to, I never hid my weed smoking. And when German cats would find out, oh, weed, I'd be like, yeah, weed, dog. They'd be like, oh, well, I don't use weed. Well, just only on special occasions. And that was basically subliminal code that they didn't even know that was like, do you have a joint? I want to smoke right now. So there wasn't one time where someone said, well, only occasionally. I was like, you want to smoke some weed now, dog? I'd be like, yeah, jawohl, So I call it like sleeper cells because culturally it's so stigmatized. Like Europe's such a funny place because it's so progressive and liberal in some ways, and then it's so conservative in other ways. And weed typifies a way that, except for harm prevention, that's a different, like how we're going to do with drug use, that's different. But how are we going to look upon you as a pot user? That is still a huge, pot is hugely stigmatized in Europe, and Germany we just broke the ceiling with that, and now it's the stigma is ending in Germany because it is legalized, and now it's not only ubiquitous, I mean it's legally ubiquitous now, so it's absolutely everywhere. And yeah, I always say like the sleeper cells get awoken because all these people want to say, yeah, I love weed and yeah, legalize weed, but they don't want to be ostracized, if you will, by their community, which everybody has to think about in whatever community or cell they're living in or around. You never want your community, you never want to be ostracized by your community. And there was a lot of pressure on Germans not to come out of the proverbial closet with cannabis. And that's being ended. Now, that being said, Berlin was always different. Now, here's how crazy Berlin is, okay? In 2016, I went to Berlin to book the first ICBC for 2017, visiting hotels and da-da-da-da. And my homeboys who lived there took me out to this restaurant. And it was not posh, but it was a really nice restaurant. Not like fine, high-end dining, but really nice restaurant, right? And it's getting towards the end of the night, and there's still plenty of fucking people eating in the restaurant, right? And my guy says to the waitress, he says in German, he says, "Können wir hier rauchen?" while he's rolling a joint up, right? Mm-hmm. And she said to him, "Kannst du 5 Minuten warten?" Can you wait 5 minutes? And I was like, holy shit, wait 5 minutes? So lo and behold, we wait 5 minutes, his joints roll, and he says to her, yeah, 5 Minuten schon dabei ist. Like, it's been 5 minutes already, right? And she says, yeah. So Berlin is notorious for being able to smoke outside of cafes, on the street. No big deal. That's already crazy enough, right? I'll tell you, Sarah, we were smoking spliffs in a nice restaurant inside Berlin in 2016. And those little experiences I really cherish and love. Because for a guy like me, and a lot of us, whether it's whatever the fuck you want to do, I'm doing what I want to do, which is usually verboten, no pun intended, and but yet I was doing it right there inside a restaurant while there were other people. I've closed down many restaurants where we get to smoke weed, right, inside. That happens all the time to me, right? But I've had very few experiences where they were just like, okay, free up. And here we were smoking weed. So this story typifies, or it's a good example of if you haven't been to Berlin or people who don't know Berlin, how buck wild Berlin really is and how people are just don't give a fuck. And it's just like, it just oozes freedom. The
Yeah,
airs of freedom.
and that has always been a deep part of Berlin culture. I mean, I know like you're mentioning San Francisco, you know, it's a way
Similar.
it's similar. It was way more similar, like you said, oh, 20
In the 90s.
years
You
ago.
could smoke
Yeah.
inside places in San Francisco in the 90s. When we were going out to shows back in the early 90s in San Francisco, we could smoke inside, I mean, clubs at least,
Yeah.
right? Maybe not a restaurant, but clubs.
Clubs you could. Yeah, you'd get your cigarette pulled out of your mouth, but they didn't care if you had a joint.
Exactly.
you know? And so many of my artist friends
Exactly.
go back and forth between there and here and say that, Berlin, just like the sheer creative freedom, the spirit of being in Berlin, it's something that you have to behold. It just seems like it makes so much sense for that to be the epicenter of what's going on and for you to be there just for that. Do you think,
Yeah.
yeah, and going to ICBC, it's a conference, but do you think it's a conference or is it more of a signal to the global industry in many ways?
Well, everything always morphs and derives into something that you either envision or don't, or kind of do, or yeah, or don't. But I love it because it's over 5,000 people from 80 countries is what we're expecting this year, and basically 25% are from Germany. Only 25% are from Germany of the attendees of the ICBC, which is a super interesting factoid. And then 25% are from Greater Europe, 25% are from Canada and America, so tons of Yankees and Canucks. And then 25% are from the rest of Europe, the rest of the world. So that's Thailand, that's Colombia, that's Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, South Africa, Lesotho, Malawi, Ghana, Morocco, Egypt, Israel, South Africa, New Zealand, it's Malaysia. I mean, so many places. Russia. I mean, you name a country that has anything to do with cannabis, and they're at the ICBC. So it's cool because it has turned into the meeting point for the international cannabis trade. And where even MJ Biz, as dope as it is, and what a juggernaut it is. Per cap, you still are meeting a lot of Americans and Canadians, and now you meet foreigners there. They do come there, but per capita, the ICBC is as diverse as any show on the planet might be. I might hasten to say.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you think about it's easier for a lot of countries to get to, for people from other countries to get to as well. Like it's
That's true for
you know
Europe itself. That's true.
that's if you're somebody who's only been in the United States, you have no concept of how much closer countries are to one another than our big behemoth.
No, I mean that's true. That's why. But only 25% are from Greater Europe. So half of the attendees for ICBC are not from Europe.
That's
So
impressive.
it is, and it was partly by design, but still, when it happens, you're just like, damn, this is actually happening. This is like the We Are the World event for weed and shit. So it's dope. But yeah, if Prague's 4 hours away, Amsterdam's 7 hours away. Switzerland's right there. Austria, no place takes more than 2 hours to get at most from a flight. Even from southern Spain, you're in Berlin in 2.5 hours, I reckon, max. So it's well positioned to have a really diverse crowd.
Yeah. Now, going into Germany, their reform rollout surprised many Americans. What are people still misunderstanding?
Yeah, another great question. That's why you do what you do, Sarah.
And I love geeking out with you. It's just so much fun.
It is indeed. Oh, it's a blessing. I mean, really, I think that's so. When Germany legalized, and Germany is the leader of the market, right? The medical cannabis market in Germany is leading everything internationally. And what people maybe don't know is that well, for one, 70% of all cannabis sold in Germany comes from Canada, right? So that's a super interesting thing. But when Germany changed their laws, they did a few things. So they didn't just do the medical cannabis thing. They took cannabis off the narcotics list, and that was a game changer.
It's huge.
But what they also did was they started cultivation clubs, right? Cultivation societies. So these are hundreds and hundreds of these cultivation societies, which are basically little local dispensaries, and there's hundreds of them now in Germany that can have 500 people, grow 1,500 plants. Well, basically they're little rec dispensaries for locals. And there's I don't know, there might be 600 almost at least 500, I reckon, folks who have got their applicants. There's another 500 in the chute that people are applying for. So right now there's hundreds, and soon there's going to be, I wouldn't say thousands, but it might get up to a couple thousand social clubs all over Germany. So weed is it's ubiquitous, right? And it's everywhere. And the third thing that they did, well, they also made seeds legal, which is another huge thing. And I guess that's a big one. But the third thing they did, which is massive, is they decrimmed. So they just said any Tom, Dick, and Harry can have 25 grams on them on the street. That's legal, right? It's not like it's not a civil offense. It's not a fine. You have it. And then up your house, you can have up to 50. And then there's like, what do they call it? Affirmative defense for up to 50 on your person outside and up to 100 at the crib, right? You can have. And you can grow your plants. Everyone can grow 3 plants. And I think that's per person per household. So that's not per household. So it's really freed up. And the next thing, you can smoke weed everywhere now in Germany, right? I mean, as you know, last year we had 500 police officers staying at the Estrella Hotel while the cannabis was going on, conference was going on, while everybody was smoking weed outside. There was cops smoking their fags outside, right? And we were intermingling with these like hardcore, they were like commando cops, right? Like no joke, fucking hardcore German commando cops. They didn't give two shits about it. Not one person said one thing. They did not eat. They didn't even bat an eye. There was not even like ha ha ha. They really didn't care. They were there to stage for a riot that was going to happen the next day. So this is so poetic. Like, are you going to really fuck with the cannabis smokers, or actually are you going to prepare for a riot, a real actual thing to do for the constabulary, right?
Right.
So it was absolutely poetic to have them preparing for rioters the next day in the city, and then having hordes of scores of people surrounding them smoking weed. And a few people were bugging out, like, holy shit, Alex, the cops. I was like, don't worry, it's all good. I mean, the hotel warned me about it before. They said, Alex, cops are there. We told them what's going on. They don't give a shit, right? They don't give a shit. There's not going to be a problem. Don't even worry about it. And that was the case. And so I think it was a great experience for everybody who was there to witness that, to feel that, because it was more than palpable. It was basically tangible at that point, right? Like, this is real.
And that's what the future should be.
100%. You've seen that cartoon, The Flower? It came out like 15 years ago. I suggest anyone to Google The Flower Cannabis and watch that little cartoon snippet. It is dope. But yeah, like busting people for weed, this is just so retarded. I don't know how society got. Well, we do know. You know, we know that people want to take control of people's lives. We know that Jack Harris said that that cannabis was legalized because of hemp, because of the petrochemical companies back in the 30s or whatever. So we know, and then the Geneva Convention, and then the federal mandatory minimums. So we know that stuff, right? But it's nice just to see logic, common sense, and compassion prevail with a big-ass country like Germany.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like, looking at what's going on over there, it seems like we're witnessing the birth of a distinctly European framework. Do you think it's rooted more in public health than commerce? You know it the moment it hits. That weight, that presence, that shift. Power you can feel. Introducing PAX 4, the next generation in dry herb vaporizers and the most powerful device PAX has ever created. Engineered for heavy clouds and high potency, 4 delivers dense vapor, fast onset, and real intensity, all without combustion. No burn, just pure controlled power from your flower. 4 precision heat modes that let you dial in your experience. Quick, high-impact hits or longer, fuller sessions. All in a device that's light in the hand, heavy on performance. And with fast USB-C charging and a redesigned oven for easier cleaning, 4 is built for real life, ready when you are, session after session. Because true power isn't about smoke, it's about how it feels. And for listeners of Planted, get 20% off PAX 4 with code PLANTED20 at PAX.com. PAX 4, power you can feel. Available starting March 3rd on PAX.com and at selected retailers.
Honest answer, no. Harm prevention is, right? And decriminating the drug is. But the actual on the ground, we're not. No, I mean, look, the fact of the matter is I can go to Germany right now. I can get online, and I can fill out a form, and I can have weed delivered to me within a couple hours, right? Mm-hmm. So it's more wild, wild west in Germany right now than it was even in Cali back in the day before rec. And this is something I didn't predict, okay? Admittingly so, right? Like, so it's medical, it's part of national pharmacopoeia, it's sold through pharmacies. That sounds clinical, right?
Right.
It's not really clinical, right? You still have your pot docs in Germany, the majority, a couple, I don't know, 50, 100 doctors might give 80, 70%, don't quote me on that, but it's some ratio of a few doctors giving the majority, just like it was in every state in America, right? Mm-hmm. And they don't, it's not a narcotic anymore, so it's really safe for doctors to do that. So then you have to go to a pharmacy, right? Well, there's got to be 300, 400 pharmacies now in Germany. More pharmacies than that sell cannabis, but 300 or 400 of them, you walk in, it's like Harborside up in that motherfucker, right? They're mandated to carry a certain amount of wares and goods for the pharma. Like you got to get your Band-Aids and aspirin or some like Tylenol or whatever, right? So they have a little counter that they have the whatever. I mean, every model's a little bit different, but this is a model I've seen. And then, bam, the pharmacy's like, ah. And that's where you go get to. That's just the weed part of the pharmacy, right? And they're actually specializing in weed. So this is happening all over Germany right now. And you have these, so you have a de facto legalization system in that anybody can get cannabis very easily under the medical system. And that you have a de facto dispensary system in that a lot of these pharmacies are basically de facto dispensaries. Now, the laws might change a little bit. The government is saying, okay, this is a little too willy-nilly. You're not even seeing a doctor. You don't even have to see a doctor, to get. And even I'm a legalizer, so I just want, however it's safe access, I'm cool with that. But if you look at it politically and you look at the long-term trajectory of the industry, we don't want to take 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, right? Mm-hmm. And so some of the operators maybe have been a little bit footloose and fancy-free and pushing the envelope and kind of a cash grab, right? Which is all is fair in love and war in the cannabis industry, right? It is what it is, and people are going to do what they're going to do, and implementation is 90% of the law, right? They say. So it's kind of a philosophical quagmire. Some people have stronger opinions one way or the other. Me, I just see kind of both sides, and I understand. For me, I'm a legalizer. I like that. But then maybe some dudes could have chilled a little bit. But yet when so many other competition is coming out and not chilling and doing this, then it becomes a race to the bottom, for lack thereof a better word, in terms of just a business perspective. And that's what's happened in Germany. I love it. I absolutely love it. I love the fact that I can go to Germany and get cannabis delivered, or go to a dispensary or a pharmacy and get it, because I can just get my medical card without seeing a doctor, right? But that might end, right? They might make you actually see a doctor maybe once a year or something like that. We don't know. But it's so wild, wild west. And now the government changed to a conservative government, and they're bugging out on it. They don't like it. But what's the fail-safe is the liberals are still coalesced with because European governments, they do coalitions, right? That's how government works in Europe. And so if you have a coalition of mostly conservatives, right, then your bidding is easier. But if you were forced to coalesce with the Liberal Party, which had big numbers because you had to do it just to make a coalition, a working coalition, that means you have to compromise more. And so we're in the position now where the SPD, the German Democrats, crude analogy, they're a big part of the coalition. They're the second biggest members of the coalition with the CDU, which is the Republicans, quote unquote, right? And so the Republicans want to do all this shit, but they're impeded because they're coalesced with a big liberal partner in the Social Democrats.
That's fascinating stuff. Yeah, just the way policy is put together in the different countries just so reflects the culture and what's going on. I mean, in the States here, back in the 215 days, you had cannabis. You didn't necessarily know who or what it came from, except for like edibles. There's branding around edibles. But your flowers, you didn't know your farmer. It wasn't like now where there's a pretty jar with lots of packaging and different brands. What do you see in the European market as far as that goes? Because I don't think we're not seeing as much branding. It kind of seems like it's more like how it was in the pre-legalization days in California.
Yeah, so branding is an issue with pharmacies. Okay, you can brand. So let's say I get some Cheech and Chong weed, right? Well, it'll say that I can request it as I buy it online, basically. That's how it goes now in Germany. So you can see what you're buying and the cookies and all that shit, right? Mm-hmm. So that's where they're branding at the starting point when the customer makes their decision to buy. When you get the package, it's not going to be Cheech and Chong all minstreled out on the with some big label, right? But it will say Cheech and Chong on the label. So it'll be a label, but it won't be like a graphic of their mugs, right?
Right.
So, but you have more ability to brand at the start of the buying process in Germany. So that's happening, and then the social clubs they can brand too. All these hundreds of social clubs that are popping up. So brands are actually starting, and there are brands under medical cannabis now in Germany, and it's a slower process, but I'll tell you right now that shit in the next 1 to 3 years is brands are gonna be massive over in Europe, and everybody now is planting a lot of folks have kind of planted their flag a little bit, and everybody now, brands are coming in, and now's the time to start building brands in Europe because that avenue exists in some way, shape, or form.
So in the U.S., we've seen brands struggle when they don't understand regulatory nuance. I imagine that risk is amplified internationally.
That's not my expertise, so I can't really speak on that definitively. Mm-hmm. I don't know how. I know they go through regulatory issues, but I don't know how that translates to brand specific. I know how that might translate to strains, and if you have a new strain or a new API and how you're going to have to get it registered with the government, right? Mm-hmm. That has to happen just like any pharmacopoeia would that would be purveyed through a pharmacy. Mm-hmm. But how that translates to brands, I don't know exactly, Miss Sarah.
Do you think that more like when people are coming to Germany, are they looking more for how they can enter the European market, or are they looking more for takeaways to take home with them?
So a year, 2, 3 years ago, looking how to enter. Now I'm having calls with Yankees, just Yankee boys, right? And they're like, oh, we have a wholesale distributor license already in Germany, or we're about to acquire one, or we've got one and we've got a grow up in Portugal that we're or we get it sent to Portugal to wash it, and then it becomes GMP, and then we have a wholesaler license that can pick it up in Germany and then sell it into the German market or the UK market. Lest we not forget, the UK market is booming right now.
Yeah.
Booming.
Well, and
Yeah.
then also I'm hearing about, France is going to come online shortly. What do you think?
Nah,
You don't think so?
nah, no, I don't. I mean, look, no, I don't. I just don't have faith in France. I don't have faith in them being able to push policy like this forward in a way that's going to make any sense. So maybe they do it, but they don't allow flour, for example. That's a possible scenario. And so I don't see them doing anywhere near anything close to UK, yes. Poland, yes. Slovenia, yes. Switzerland, yes. France, I'm not excited about France. I just, it's not really I have a gut feeling, and I know about the market a little bit, and I know about the culture, I live in France, I lived in France, I speak French, I know how France operates, and they're just not really that progressive. They're very bureaucratic and extremely bureaucratic, right? To the point of just pure madness. And so I don't have faith in France. I do have faith in, like I said, Germany, Poland, the UK. You see, there's seller markets and there's buyer markets in Europe. Everybody wants to sell to Germany. Everybody wants to sell to the UK. Everybody wants to sell to Poland. Who's everybody? Portugal, Spain, Switzerland, actually, they do both. Macedonia, those are countries that it's not legal in, but there it's legal to export, right? So you have these exporter countries, and you have then the importer countries. And so some are really clearly identified as import. But in terms of the sophistication of like who's coming to ICBC and what they have going on and where they're at in terms of their business plan or model, shit. These cats are people would be shocked. A lot of people in the cannabis industry, it's an incestuous industry in America, and if they come to like a lot of industries are, and if they come to Europe, when they come to Europe, they're blown away by how sophisticated the market is. They're just like, holy shit, like all these heads, but there's suits, but there's like, this is a dope vibe. Like cannabis is, it's like when hip hop expanded out of America, and then you go see some like hip hop show in Germany, and you're like, what are these dudes gonna do? And they come out and they rip the microphone, and you're like, holy shit, these Germans can fucking rap. My God. And it's kind of like, it's similar to I used that analogy the other day, but it's like true. You're like, oh, we're the weed game, right? And let's face it, America, the West Coast, we are the weed. That's the epicenter, right? California, 96, Jack Hare, Dennis Perrone, Dale Geringer, Ed Rosenthal, Debbie Goldsberry, Chris Conrad, all these cats that were there back in the day making it all happen. That's the epicenter. That's that. But don't be hating, Like my boy Del the Funky Homo Sapien said to me one day when I was talking about foreign rap, he's like, oh, that's not, he was dissing it, right? I'm sure, this was like 30 years ago, so I'm sure he would not diss international rap now, but he's like, yo, we the root. I'm like, yeah, but like, what is hip hop? Is it just, it's poetry? Is Africa the root? The griot from, where is the root, right? To spoken word or to being poetical, right? And we realize, oh shit, every language has can flow, as we say. Maybe you want to call it alliteration in a more academic term, but every language has its flow, right? So then we realized, oh shit, this is how it. So the same thing's true for cannabis. We're so myopic and provincial because we have it all there, but now we step outside of our big world and realize, oh shit, it's fucking, this is bananas, and it's really shocking. It's really refreshing. It's just, cannabis bringing people together like it all, maybe it brought the white boys and the brothers together in the hood and shit back in the day with the hip. Well, shit, this is bringing different countries together now and shit, the cannabis, So it's I don't know. I'm really tickled pink, really, when I think about what we built here. It's a massive force, in the global industry. And people thought I was crazy 10 years ago. They thought I was absolutely batshit crazy to do this. And they could be right, they could have been right about that, but somehow it worked out. So
discover the power of Yorma's Choice CBD products. When we chose a sober life, we searched for the best CBD to manage our chronic pain. In Raywood, Kentucky, the home of Bickett and Boone, we found the perfect solution. Yorma's Choice is a range of topicals, tinctures, bath salts, and gummies. Choose Yorma's Choice for pain-free living. Shop now at furpeaceranch.com. FURPEACERANCH.com.
I know. I'm always of the thought that if someone thinks you're crazy, it means you're onto something.
yeah, well, you never know. Okay.
You never know. You never know. But I know
There's a thin line.
there is a thin line. When I saw you in
Crazy.
Barcelona last year and meeting a lot of people on the international scene, there are a lot of commonalities. The passion and the love for cannabis, but there's also like this sophistication that was brought to it that you don't see as often here in the States. And also, it seemed like there was more of a era of collaboration, or like people would be doing the same things. Like I noticed with the seed companies, they're in competition, but they all still work together and they all still get along. And you see them at one company, like I was at the Blimburn party and you saw people from other seed companies there and they're all friends and it's like healthy competition.
Yeah, those old boys, those old school OGs, they do get along, the healthy competition. I'd say the new school cats aren't quite as kumbaya, But them old school cats, they I appreciate what you say because that's hella true, Them cats, they are in competition, but then there's a fraternity that exists between them as well.
They made it through so much together. Like they know what it's like to be in the trenches, and
Exactly.
when it was way more was at stake than now. I think that the new guard could learn a lot from that.
100%. But blessings, because the new guard just needs to have a clear understanding. Don't take this shit for granted. Like a lot of people a lot of lives were ruined. A lot of people had, a lot of shit happened, a lot of risk was taken. And I don't mean just risk to sell weed or whatever and not get caught. I mean risk like I'm going to be an activist. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to try to actually change the law and change the narrative. And socially that can be, obviously that can be a risk and frowned upon by your peers or your family or by your community. And, so big up to the activists that just didn't give a fuck and didn't capitulate to some illogical narrative.
Yeah. When I look at when I first started working in the industry, and I've always loved cannabis, but I never thought that I'd be working it. I thought I'd just be enjoying it. But I was going back to school for org psych, and one of the things that we talked about with like organizational change was storming, norming, and reforming. And I see that a lot in like what we're doing. So like everything's kind of crazy in the beginning, and then we start to kind of, put the guardrails up and try to create, some sort of structure. But then when we, it's like, okay, all right, we've got it going a little bit. Now let's refine this. And we're like such a nascent industry. But do you see what do you see in Europe around that? And I'm wondering, like, when you were talking, my mind was going in so many different directions because you had so many good things you're putting out there. Like, what do you see when the dust clears? What do you see going on? And how do you see ICBC being an important part of that? Because I see the first time that you did ICBC, I looked at that and I thought, here Alex is, he's helping people create a roadmap and bringing us into the next level, like where we're actually playing like grown-ups, legitimate businesses, and growing this and seeing it through a much more sustainable professional lens while keeping the heart.
Yeah. So I think I'm getting better even at kind of basically helping direct and shape the trajectory of the industry, right? I came to the conclusion about a year ago that I didn't want EU harmonization. I didn't want uniform European laws. I'm not a fan, I'm not a proponent of the EU. I don't believe in the EU as a structure because it is if people understand most people don't understand what the EU is first and foremost. They just think this or that. They don't understand how the construct of the EU, right? Which is basically a government built on non-direct democracy, right? So it's not a democracy. The EU is not a democracy, right? It is run by the Council on Europe and the European Commission, which are unelected bureaucrats, right? So fundamentally, I can't support the EU, right? Now, there's many examples where you could say, oh, the EU did some good. There's certainly many examples where you could say they did some bad. Well, they're lockstep with the UN in terms of the drug policy. And so they're New World Order. They want monoculturing. They want one state, They do it under the auspices of, well, if you're proud of your state, you're a Nazi, anti-nationalism. But we know it's okay to be proud of where you come from. We know everybody likes Europe. Everybody likes the mosaic of culture, We like that. And so the EU is diluting that notion. So I don't want to rant too much about the EU, but I will say that their cannabis policy is poor, right? And their drug policy is poor, right? It's shit, right? So everybody knows that. Every liberal knows that and doesn't like the EU because of at least that reason, right? If they like them I said I was a proponent before. I'm an opponent. I'm sorry, I misspoke before. Let me qualify that now. So that means when people are saying, oh, we want this governing body of unelected officials to decide our fate in terms of cannabis policy, well, it's similar to California, right? Like when people were like, oh, well, look, I used to tell people in Europe, I said, you know what the irony of America cannabis policy is? I said, the irony is that medical cannabis is underregulated and recreational adult use is overregulated, right? And they were like, oh, that is ironic. And like I said, I predicted a lot of shit in Europe, but I didn't predict it was going to be so wild, wild west, like I said, right? So in this case, I believe that the same comparison will be true if we allow, because the EU is basically like the federal government of Europe, right? And I'm not sure if this is true for America. I have a different opinion, right? Because the federal government of America, they're still directly elected. So there is some, whether you believe in how the system works or whatever, but in the EU, it's extra bad, right? Because they're not elected. So California, which is an analogy of where the state government was elected, but then fucked everything up through uber regulation. So there's the irony. And I do believe the same thing's going to happen to Europe. So I do think the EU will eventually open up, and I think when they do, they're going to over-regulate cannabis, and it won't be the best thing. So I believe now for the next 5 to 7 years is the golden time for Europe. Like I said, implementation's 90% of the law. So now you have these de facto medical systems. So I see cannabis under medical auspices, under social clubs, under these type of things, because you can do anything in Europe if it has to do with research or medical, right?
Right.
Vermutlich, supposedly, right? So I believe this system with creative humans is going to be the golden years when we say, oh, it was so free, it was so open. Remember when it was this way? Even though one day it might be every adult in Europe could go into a store and get cannabis, right? And there is something to be said about that, and there is an allure to that. However, I believe that all that glitters not gold, and we have to really be aware, cognizant of what type of when policy opens up. Be careful what you wish for, because the devil's in the details, and it could actually be a more oppressive world for cannabis, even for the personal user, it might be more open, but just decrim. And that's one way they are good in Europe for decrim. They're doing more decrim, more harm prevention stuff. That is true. So the first thing I said when I spoke at the first ICBC was, what we need, there's two major things that happen. We need to end all criminal penalties towards cannabis, and we need to have and let for a home grow. Well, they haven't done that completely, but they've done the home grow. They've halved the criminal penalties in Germany because of the new law. So they just took it, by common sense, they took everything down, which wasn't mandated by them, I don't believe. And now you can grow, you can smoke on the street in Germany, you can go get it. You could even be a grower if you want. You'd have to get a medical license, or you could be a wholesaler. That's not as expensive as being a domestic grower or the capital outlay. This is what I like. And of course, there is a scenario where you could have it federally or Europe, EU-wide legalized. But that's not good anyway, because every country should be able to decide what the fuck they want to do with cannabis anyway. They're sovereign nations, right?
Right.
So I believe in this idea of sovereign nations still, and I don't think the EU should do it. And I think if they do it, it could go bad for all those aforementioned reasons.
Yeah, I think that going
it's a
kind
nuanced
of like,
take. It's a nuanced take, Sarah. A lot of people aren't saying this quite like I'm saying this, but I just tell it I just call it like I see it.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to do that, and I think it is important to honor the cultural differences, and that's how policy should be reflected, even though it isn't. I mean, like, even down to like in minutia, like when I go to different farmers' cultivations, you see the way they're set up and what they choose for genetics. The style is very much a reflection on who they are and their ethos. We see that in the States here too, which is why when we're getting into federal legalization, I always give a little bit of pause, because I'm like, well, who does this represent? Because as see,
same thing. And we just passed medical cannabis here in Slovenia. That's been a lot of work. And when we were coming up with what should we do, we're got this clean slate. We said, we'll do what Germany did. But we won't do social clubs, right? And I'm a proponent, I'm a big proponent of social clubs in Germany, right? But Slovenia is 2 million people, right? It's not 80 million people. It's a very sensitive little country, and they've got so many great things going on. We don't want to disrupt things too much, right? We like what we have here. I'm not going to be the California guy that comes to Austin to bring my or to Texas to be like a Californian, right? I live in Slovenia. I will bring some of my ideas, but I will be highly cognizant of the Slovenian culture, the ecosystem, if you will, the cultural ecosystem here, if you will, and I will listen to people as I come up with policy. I won't be an ideologue that says, we got to do it this way because this is the right way. Maybe not. So just listen to people and understand the culture you're in, and adapt and move forward accordingly. So Slovenia was a good example of exactly what we're talking about, when I could have maybe gone a little more willy-nilly, and I was just like, you know what? Let's just take cannabis off the narcotics list for a prescription. That's got to be one of the best things we could do, and everything will kind of fall in line after that, right? And so that's the thing that I like, Sarah, is I see the future and I see policy. I see just take it off the narcotics list everywhere. Just fucking take it off, and then it frees it up, and then it becomes a whole different animal and a different playing field. And now it's not so much the redheaded stepchild in terms of public stigma, or just in terms of regulatory issues.
Yeah, I think that also just having the conversations with your experience, the experience of other people who were, working in policy and in new markets or even established ones, talking about what worked and what didn't work for them and allowing people to make their own choices. It's kind of like going to the potluck with your casserole, offering it up and not being too upset if other people don't want to pick it up.
They don't call it hot dish in Michigan like they do in Minnesota, Sarah?
They do in some places. Yeah, definitely. That in bars, you
Yeah.
bring it to
Yeah,
everything.
bars. Oh, yeah, I got the hot dish in the bars.
Oh,
Oh,
the
and I
lemon
got the
bars.
Jello with some little marshmallows
Well,
and buns rind.
I almost did say the Jello salad, but I don't know if not everybody would get
Yeah, no, you want to relate with your audience, right?
right. Oh man, what
Too
are
much.
so Slovenia has been a market that people I think were really surprised by just because their eyes weren't on it. But what are some other sleeper markets in Europe that you're excited about?
I mean, sleeper market. Listen, I mean, Poland and Czech Republic, right? Those are big markets. Eventually, Croatia will come on. The Balkans will come on. Greece. Lest we not forget, Greece's medical program is starting to pop. I should definitely mention Greece, and Switzerland could probably be the first country to. They're not part of the EU, but they could be the first country to actually have some type of legalization for adult use. Gotta love Switzerland. Dope little country. And then you can forget about the northern country. You can forget about Scandinavia ever legalizing weed, which is another super irony because we think they're such the super liberal, super whiteys, and they fucking are like weed is like the worst thing up there, right? Not available, and we just think they're just like these like blondie, like, oh yeah, everything's good and we have socialized everything, and they hate weed, right? So it's super interesting. Not France, not Spain. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like Spain's supposed to have medical and they're supposed to come on. We'll see. France has a little chance, just because there is so many people want it there. So if the people organize and they can will something together, France, I don't want to be too disparaging to France, but I really am for sure not holding my breath. Greece, Slovenia, Czech Republic, Poland, Switzerland, Italy has a much better chance of coming on stronger online than France. Even with their conservative government that have been a little bit punitive here and there with the CBD, they're kind of more libertarian conservatives, or at least the gal is Maloney, I think her name is, who runs the country. There's more hope there, but there's some countries where there's just like, you name it, and there's like, that shit's not going to happen. But if you when I came to Slovenia a few years ago and told everyone I was going to legalize weed, everyone was like, I mean, if I had a nickel for every kind of pessimistic, disgruntled Slovenian saying that'll never happen, never happen, never in a million years, right? So once you flip that switch and you get the people to believe and you do wake up those sleeper cells, then anything's possible. But people are just kind of, Europeans are a little bit, especially Western Europeans, they're just kind of, I mean, I don't want to say pussies because they're not pussies, okay? But I look at it that way because, like, dude, just say you smoke weed, bro. Like, fucking, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
But then you realize the history and how, envy and jealousy with neighbors and communities. It's a big thing in Europe because they all live so close together and they've all had all these wars and their neighbors have tried to kill them before or switched on them or whatever. That's not that far back in history. And of course, I live in the Balkans, all right? So it's the clearest, like, multi-ethnic war, like let's just say more than two, right? Because there was three in up in the mix: the Muslims, the Catholics, or the Catholics and the Orthodox.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's how that. So people don't really. That's really hard to understand. So anyway, I lost my train of thought now, but. What were we saying? How
You're going on a good run there, right, man? So going back to Switzerland, they're so methodical. When I heard that they were going towards medicinal, I wondered, like, I'm like, that's great, but how long is it going to take them just because they are so methodical?
Yeah, I mean that is a big issue. Like, oh, we're gonna, they always okay, we'll have a pilot project, or we'll have a pilot project, and we'll do it for 5 years, and then assess after 5 years. I don't think it's going to take that. I think they'll be able to expedite it quicker than that, because the legislation can change and the people can change within that 5 year time. And as long as then there's a mandate from the legislator or the people, or the cantons, as the Swiss government does. I mean, they're a very wonderful constitutional republic, how it really should be, with autonomized cantons, have their autonomy. All cantons have to, it can be bureaucratic and it can go slow because of that, right? But everybody has a say, and everybody has their own communities can decide for themselves. I think it'll be quicker though, because of that reason, that politically the political trajectory will be quicker than whatever they said they should do a couple years back. That would take 5 or 10 years. That'll be expedited a bit quicker. But it's a really good point, and it could be indeed. Well, if it's 5 years, Switzerland said it's 5 years, so 5 years is 5 years because we said it's 5 years, so it's got to be 5. There is that element within European bureaucracy, like, well, 5 years is 5 years, 5 years, 5 years, and Switzerland is very regimented that way. So you make a great point. I'm not sure about that one, but my instinct is that it'll be expedited a little bit quicker.
Well, and also I think
quickly.
You can correct me if I'm wrong, but because of how methodical they are and people knowing that when they do come up with something, I think it could be an inspirational blueprint, not necessarily verbatim, but inspire people to look at what they should be doing for their own policies for their countries.
I think so. I think Switzerland has a pretty good, I think that's true. I think Switzerland will do it better than the EU would if they decided they were going to have uniform measures. I think Switzerland is just a free country. You can smoke weed anywhere in Switzerland. Nobody gives a fuck. Really, they don't. You smoke weed everywhere. It's a super weed-friendly country. It's been that way for a long time. I lived in Switzerland almost 30 years ago. And it was illegal for 5-6 years. There was a window. A lot of people don't know this.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. You're older than you look. So. And so,
thanks, man. Yes, I am.
It's like you're like fucking 25 and shit, talking about like, God, are you close to my age? Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I sure am.
Well, I'll take 2 of whatever you're having.
It's all the weed, I swear. It is.
All right. No, I agree. I'm almost 55. I just did my pull-up record a few days ago. So, but anyway, I digressed and lost my train of thought.
I know. It's always fun talking with you. Let's get back to the conference. So what makes ICBC different than any other cannabis event? Because it is
what we said. Look, never could you have 5,000 people at an event like that and it wouldn't feel a little bit like a shit show, where you wouldn't feel like, I'm not one of the cool kids, or it's a little bit overwhelming. And that's not the ICBC. It's hella friendly. If anybody's a dick, I'll kick them out personally. You know what I mean? It's like, you can't be a dick. You got to respect the ladies, obviously, So none of that fucking shit. If any of that shit happens, then, and we're in Europe, so it doesn't mean you have to, but if you put your hands on anyone or are aggressive in any way, we kick you right out of there. And when I do business, I do a lot of the sales for ICBC still, right? So if I get a vibe from somebody, I won't bend over backwards to just make a sale with them. I'll just be like, nah, you're kind of a dick, and I don't really like your vibes. So I curate it, and you can only curate so much as it gets so big. But thus far, I've done a really good job of making it big and still having it be like just really down home, really friendly. Like, let's eschew the pretension, I mean, don't do that shit under my watch. Don't be pretentious with me. I just try to be as real, as authentic as I can be in life in general. And I just think that oozes off me, and people know if you're going to come around me or my area, don't act a fool, or you're going to get straight up checked, Mm-hmm. And look, I used to produce hip hop shows, 30 years ago in the Bay, I'm like the only white dude in the place producing that shit, dealing with all the brothers back 30 years ago, it's like, That's school, you know what I mean? That's living, right? And so doing this shit, right? You know, like just coming to Europe and do some conference, it's like Candyland compared to like being in the trenches and doing shows in like Oakland and shit. As like, and back in the day, there weren't many white guys in rap, right? So it's like, so I was a little bit of knowledge. People used to say, "Oh, you're a white rapper. That must be a disadvantage." I'd be like, "Hell no, that's an advantage. You want to stand out as a performer." You know what I mean? And so the same's true. I regulate that shit. You know what I mean? I regulate hard. And if anybody, you know, we nip any bad energy in the bud. And, you know, when we talk about our narrative and we start off the day, we say our only rule is don't be a dick. You know, understand that this is a blessing that we're here in life. We're in the cannabis industry. Let's make a little different change. I don't want to get too preachy, you know, or pedant, you know, or what's the word? Didactic, but it's just something we put. Just be fucking nice, be cool, don't be a dick, and let's get some business done. Be cool with your neighbor. We're family, you know what I mean? So I push that so hard, and so we'll see as we grow. It's really important for me to keep that vibration. I think it's always going to be, you know, as long as I just keep working on myself as a human and evolving. Then when you come to ICBC, it's massive, people from everywhere, and it is like just such killer vibes. And people who are not there, you know, we see people not fitting in, we'll come up to them, be like, "Yo, what's your name? Blah, blah, blah. Yo, come." You know, it's like the kid who's just the wallflower on the playground or whatever. You know what I mean? That's not it. We're not here to bully people. We're not here to people back. We're here to include people and bring love, you know? And everything comes from love. And I don't want to get too preachy. I'm not motherfucking Teresa, okay? I'm not. However, as I get older, I realize there's certain ways to operate that are just beneficial for me, right? And just coming from a personal perspective, and I know if I can just stay centered and grounded and not like, "Oh, I'm the big man. I run the..." You know, I call it king for a day, right? Because my life's fairly inglorious. Otherwise, I'm on the phone, I'm working 14 hours a day, you know what I mean? But I get to be king for a day. So I better be a benevolent king for that day, you know, rather than some hotshot wannabe, right? I don't play that shit. I don't like that. I check for Rasta. I check for Buddhas, you know what I mean? Just try to keep, and like I said, I'm no fucking Mother Teresa. I'm not an angel, but you can still do better and make an effort. And I think that's what separates ICBC from the other conferences. Not that there's not other dope vibes at other conferences, there are. But this is a business conference with like suits and fucking rich, well-heeled, you know, entrepreneurs. You know, there's a lot of egos involved. But we are able to deal with it. You know, you come into that space and it's like, you know, it's like magic protected force field of love and happiness.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you really, you know, you started stoking the fires for 2026 at, you know, MJ BizCon in December when you guys all came out, and really, you know, you had your area where you're, you know, doing more with the international audience, really getting people excited about this coming year. We're seeing a lot more of that on social media as we're coming up to the date of the conference where people are excited about coming and speaking and everything. As people are looking to Berlin and wondering if they should attend, who should be in the room and why? Like, who's going to get the most out of this?
You have to, you know, when I get on calls with folks from, let's say, outside Europe, in Europe, it's kind of a no-brainer, but people are like, "Oh, I've got this American business, I do that." I look, where's the crossover? Where is the crossover? So if people don't know, they can always reach out to ICBC, you know, we can kind of line them up. But obviously, everything ancillary is there. So a lot of people won't come because their hands are full. They already have enough business. But now a lot of people are looking to expand, and they have the bandwidth to do it, even if business is good or not, right? And so everything ancillary is popping, right? Everything, you name it. But also what we're doing is, like, if you're a producer and you're on the plant touching side, like I said, I'm talking with a lot of American cats who I call them up. They're like, "Oh, I got a license in Germany." I was like, "You do?" like shocking me and shit. I'm like, dope, homie. You got so you what? Oh, and you work with this pharmacy? Oh, you about to buy this or not buy? You can't buy a pharmacy, but you're about to work with this pharmacy? They're like, yeah, da 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 da. So the people, so it runs the gamut, But service providers, it's all happening right now in Europe, and even for plant touching. Everybody's got a niche where growers, a lot of master growers have been hired now to come from America to come to Europe to head up gardens. I mean, we're a soup to nuts show. So we have, you name it, a faction of the cannabis industry, and it's represented at ICBC. So it's a little bit of a vague answer, but I really don't know any other answer to give, because all I can tell you is if you talk to me and you say, I have this, this, and this, and that, sometimes I'll say no, and a lot of times I have said no. But the last year, I'm usually like, well, there's this play or there's this play, And so now it's all opening up, and there's a play for everybody as long as they have the will and the bandwidth.
Yeah, yeah. What conversations are you hoping happen on stage this year?
Look, it's all about medical cannabis in Germany. Like the law is changing, possibly changing that, or at least administratively, like saying, oh, you might have to see a doctor now instead of just go online and fill out a form. So that'll change the industry. I mean, it'll adapt. So we're really understanding what are the changes going to be. How can we be stewards of the medical cannabis industry? And really keep and actually come together and have a long-term vision rather than it have to be a cash grab to the bottom. Yeah. And I think that's a big conversation to be had. Also, Thailand is there, Colombia is there, South Africa is there, Australia is there. Everybody wants to sell into Germany, so that's a big conversation of is Canada gonna lose some of their share, their 70%? They're probably projected to do $1.3 billion to sell to Germany this year. So is Thailand going to take some of that? Because now people say, oh shit, they're growing some good weed now in Thailand and shit. You got some actual master growers go down there, right? Because it wasn't good tradition. Just like Jamaican weed wasn't good. Let's just keep it real, right? They might be good strains or whatever, but they didn't cure that shit. It's all brown. It all gets brown. We know, people know what's up, right? But now it's all green, scentsy, that Cali shit that they learned how to grow. And now these jurisdictions are coming online. So that's another huge, huge thing. Also social clubs. Just last year, there really weren't any social clubs. They were just getting started. Now you have 500 of them licensed, a few hundred of them up and running right now. That's a super interesting market that will actually cut into the medical space, right? Where people can now get it wrecked. But medical doesn't seem to be slowing down. The social clubs doesn't seem to slowing down right now. Maybe another conversation is where's this diminishing rate of returns now that the curve is vertical right now? Where will the diminishing rate of when will that happen? 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4? Like where is it, and in what industries will it happen? So all this little esoteric shit we'll be delving into. That it's a crash course for anybody who's not European or that doesn't understand the European market. Come to ICBC, and that is a 2-day crash course, and just get ready to soak it in like a sponge and be begeistert, as they say in Germany. I think it means like flabbergasted or something.
I think it's also a good opportunity to really dig deep and figure out what you need as a differentiator in the market, because as we do grow and there are so many people out there, you need to stand out. This episode is brought to you by Fat Nugs Magazine, a global perspective of cannabis and stoner culture as a bridge to the rest of the world. Right now, you can join Fat Nugs Magazine, Beard Bros Farms, Freedom Grow, and Jailed for Weed in the upcoming Prisoners Edition and help spotlight current and past cannabis prisoners and their stories, because no one should be in jail for a plant. Find Fat Nugs Magazine's beautiful print copies at your local dispensary, fatnugsmag.com, and on socials. Cannabis culture welcomes us all.
Well, look, I got a lot of folks coming at me from America, and they're very excited to come over to Europe because they've seen it all, right? And what I did, and they've got a little bit of insight, a little bit of crystal ball into the market, or a little bit of expertise that they've been able to kind of mold and now wield that might be have utility over in Europe as well. So they have an advantage, and I just tell them, you have an advantage, but you better understand it's not a direct analogy, and you better understand culturally how to do business in Europe. Because if you come too cowboy style and you're just like bottom line, bottom line, bottom line, the Americans, we love that shit. We don't want to waste time. We're like, we don't give a shit about you. We want to make money. How are you going to help me? I mean, we do care, but comparatively speaking, we don't. The Europeans, first thing you need to do, if when you go to your European customer and you see them, you got to sit down for like 30 minutes minimum and have a beer or a coffee or whatever. You have to. You have to. It drove me crazy for a while. Now I'm pretty much Europeanized, but because I'd go to booths, I'd go to shows, I'd want to hustle up ICBC, and I'd go to other shows in Europe. But like, hey, my name's Alex Rogers, here's my card. I want to come to the ICBC. They're like, hey, you want to sit down? I'd be like, not really. You know what I mean? But I was like, shit, I got like fucking 70 more dudes to go, and you want me to have a beer with you for a half hour? I got 2 days, you know? But you got to do it. If you're not willing to do that. But indeed, most Americans like that shit. They're like, oh, it's different. You know, it's really, there's a lot of camaraderie. You know, it's like, I'm feeling this connection. They want to feel that connection with you in Europe. They don't give a shit. Because here's the deal. In Europe, it's harder to make a friend in Europe, okay? But it's also harder to lose that friend once you have that friend. And I think that's a really good, you know, example of how to go about doing business in Europe and understanding. It's just like a brand. It's harder to build a brand in Europe, but it's also harder to lose it because Europeans are just more skeptical in general. So once you gain, because they don't give a shit. They want to know you. They're just more down to earth in a lot of ways, in general. And so once they know you though, and then now you homeboys or whatever, or homegirls, then you're good, man. You got to go stay at that motherfucker's house for like a week when you're in Dusseldorf or wherever the fuck they live, right? Come to my house. You could stay. You know, Americans say that they're like, well, I'm kind of busy, and Europeans mean that shit. They're like, yes, stay, brother. You're my homie, you know? And so it's harder to lose a friend too, just like that. Harder to build a brand, harder to lose a brand in Europe. Now, it can be lost, trust me. Yeah, I've seen it happen. But to understand little shit like that, that's a little esoteric tidbit for your people, Sarah, to really kind of live by if they want to do business in Europe and thrive as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Well, I think there's something really rich and valuable about that because those are deep relationships that are cultivated. Whereas, you know, I mean, it's kind of, it's not unlike some of the stuff that we see here in the States. Like I always joke, you know, Midwesterners, you know, they say we're friendly, but they're not like, oh, well, you're not as friendly as Californians. And I'm like, yeah, but here's the difference. Like when I say I want to have lunch, I mean it.
It's the same thing. So the Europeans are like the Midwesterners of America, right?
Right.
That's the same thing. When I go to I'm a Midwesterner, so I go out to the coast and I'm just like, whoa, you know. Yeah. But in the Midwest, you get to the Midwest, people are just like, oh yes, They're just more deliberate and they're not as hype about shit, and super similar. That's a huge point.
And when you're stuck on the side of the road in the Midwest, they stop. This is one of the last places in the States where they'll actually still stop and help you.
100%. like. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I got a flat tire there.
Come over and have some bars and a hot dish at my place while I help you.
Oh yeah, hot dish. That's right. Some cocoa. Oh, here's some cocoa. I love it. Yeah, it's true. It's a great point. It's a great point, my dear. I appreciate everything, Sarah. Yeah.
I
nice.
So appreciate you. So one last question for you. As somebody who believes conversation is normalization, what conversations does Europe still have to have publicly?
For cannabis? Publicly? Mm-hmm. Europe in general or Germany? Or Europe in general?
Dealer's choice.
Sorry, I go back to the EU again. I really go back to sovereignty. Just Don't worry about what the EU says. You got to do what your own country says. Countries are limited because now if they do something, if they want to have progressive policy, the EU can be punitive. The UN can't. There's no punitive recourse with the UN, but the EU has punitive recourse. So I think the conversation, it's happening in Europe right now. I mean, look, the conversation is always, don't be hating on stoners, right? Like, do not hate on stoners. That's probably the number one, like, cultural conversation that needs to be had. Don't conflate weed with these junkies on the street, on heroin, and, just know that there's productive stoners, and by the way, you're one of them. So I guess, for me, honestly, the conversation to be had is each individual needs to come out of the closet. Now, just like if someone's gay or whatever, it's not anyone's right to say, you should come out of the closet. No, that's a personal decision that they have to make. We don't know their world, what the ramifications of them coming out is going to be, right?
Right.
And that's true with cannabis, right? However, we're at a time now where it's like, enough already. Just tell motherfuckers you smoke weed, and that's just it is gonna be okay, and you're gonna do so. And I like I said, I'm not trying to judge someone because I'm not in their skin. I don't know what they have to deal with, but I do push that. It's like, just grow a pair and just tell motherfuckers you smoke weed. It ain't gonna be the end of the world. And it's not like saying you're gay or something like that. Think how hard that must have been, like back in the 80s or whatever, or not, right?
Yeah.
Like that's difficult, right? So you compare it to be like, oh, I smoked some weed. Like that should be an easy one. So that's what I'd impart on into the Europeans is like, come on, just say you smoke weed and don't be such a pussy. That's what I think is important. And I don't really think they're taking such a big chance anymore by doing that. And then in turn, I would just say, don't depend on the EU. Don't depend on your corporate overlord. The corporation's never going to be the sponsors of the revolution, right? So don't depend on your corporate overlords to dictate your public policy. You've got to come from the bottom up, not the top down. And Europe is a very top down, technocratic place and state, right? And I would just tell folks, get a little bit of that libertarian, anarchist mentality and be community-based. And because if we're not if we don't bring the world back from globalism, if we don't bring it back to communityism, we're totally fucked. So in all types of ways, you can't be a globalist and an environmentalist. Sorry. You can't just go pollute whatever you want and say, I'm going to buy some trees in India to offset that. Sorry, garbage. Again, the corporations will never be the sponsors of the corporatocracy will never be the sponsor of the revolution. They're always going to have their interests protected, and we just have to be aware of centralized power and power consolidating. And the more you can decentralize power, the better. And Europe needs that mantra also. So I wasn't thinking I had any good answer for that, but I think that's exactly how I feel.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and I think you're spot on. I mean, people don't understand the power that they have. They don't understand how impactful one can be at a grassroots level. It's something that I've learned through my work with policy, because the further up the chain I work, the less impactful it seems like it is. But when you're doing stuff on the ground level in your, whether it's, your hometown or your county or what have you, when in the States, but it's like that's throughout the world. Like, do what you can locally, get active. Your voice means more than you could ever know.
Grassroots agency. It's real clear. And you can do a lot with very little when you have that, where you have like rich people trying to top down shit. They need mass resources to make little change. We need very little resources when you organize as a community. You can make change very quickly. And that's what we've done in Europe, that's in Germany, that's what we've done in Slovenia, that's what we did in Oregon, that's what we did in California back in the day. And so if what's past is prologue, then we're just getting started, baby.
That's right, we are. So for people who want to learn more about the conference, learn more about the work that you're doing, how do they do that, and how do they contact if they have questions or want to engage?
Sure. I wish I could give you my socials. I don't know them, but so you can put them in the whatever the links. But internationalcbc.com. Just Google cannabis conference, business conference, international or Europe or Germany, and then you go to our website and everything's right there. Tickets go up on March 18th, so that'll a couple $100. So if you're interested in going, get your tickets before then. And just if anybody has any questions, we're super available. I'm available. Just hit us up, and we're ready to rock and roll, which everybody in Berlin.
I'm so excited. And for those listening, on our socials, you'll see the handles for ICBC as well if you want to follow them on social media. So, Alex, it's always wonderful getting to chop it up with you. I'm looking forward to seeing you in Berlin, and I'm looking forward to more conversations.
Word. Thank you so much, Sarah. It's been delightful.
Thank you. And everyone, remember, if you like listening, please give us a review, share it with a friend. Let us know what your favorite episodes are. And if you'd like to stay in touch over social media, we are Planted with Sara Payan on Facebook and Planted with Sara on Instagram and Twitter. You can also go to our website, www.plantedwithsara.com, or listen to us on our parent network, Radio Misfits Network, where there are other great podcasts, like one of my favorites, the Winemakers Podcast. So check it out. You can listen to Planted wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, whether that's Pandora, Spotify, Amazon, Google, Apple, Stitcher. Tune in. We are there. So join us. And until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, it's a wild world out there. Be good to one another. Until next time, take care.